Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Again, I still don't know what I'm going to call it, but if you have any ideas, feel free to submit them in the comment boxes below. And as you do, and I just want to ask you, if you enjoy these discussions about politics and church and Christianity, please subscribe to the channel. And yeah, just follow me and I will be posting up these. I'll try to do them weekly. I think I can. I use the nighttime. I'm a night owl, so I'll use the nighttime to kind of set up my little studio and create these videos. So hopefully you guys can tune in. So remember to subscribe. So here we are, kind of looking back at these last couple of days. It's been a day or two now since the election, and just wanting to talk about what's going on, what's happening. We are waiting on a number of states. Currently, we're waiting for Nevada. We're waiting for North Carolina. Waiting for, and I think they said North Carolina, they won't know or they won't report until next week, which is crazy. Again, Trump is leading. They have about 96% of the vote counted. I think it's even 98 now. So they have that. We have Georgia leading big in Pennsylvania. And then Trump seems to be challenging or having a close eye on Michigan. We are waiting for Arizona. That one was called way too soon. So there's still a lot in the air. So I know a lot of people have been asking me, hey, it's done, it's over. Others have been saying, hey, what's going to happen? So we still have some hope. We're still waiting to see what this is all going to look like. That being said, it's interesting to me to see that Biden is actually won some of these states. So I have a couple of things that I'm going to touch on. Right now, I want to talk about just this voter enthusiasm. It was much more real in the last election when you had Hillary versus Trump. Trump still had a lot more voter enthusiasm. So obviously that was a big thing for him. But Hillary also had a good amount of enthusiasm. So I wasn't feeling really confident there. Really what they had to focus on was their policies, what they were going to push for, and doing the work, right? So I mentioned in my last video that part of the voter enthusiasm is Trump doing the work because he's going to all these different places and campaigning there. And when you bring all that energy, you rile up your base because they see that their leader, the person who's they're voting for, that we're voting for, is out there and he's energetic and he's entertaining and he's trying to just push the American agenda. His whole thing was America first, America first. And I think that was an important message because for years, it was us. Remember the apology tour that Obama went on? That was just embarrassing. Really, they talk about being respected. We weren't being respected. I have a lot of Korean friends, or one Korean friend in particular, who gives me the 411, right? On how other countries were seeing the United States. And during Obama's reign, we were a laughingstock. According to him, he was sharing, he's like, Sam, you should have seen how many of our people would just look at the USA and think how fools we are for bowing to China and bowing to all these other countries. Because one of the things that they appreciated was our stance on freedom. Notice, and you saw this in the throughout the NBA and throughout a couple of other sports that, well, specifically the NBA, they wouldn't call out the persecution happening in China, right? They just wouldn't call it out. Not even Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban got hammered by Megyn Kelly on her podcast as to why he wouldn't call out any type of human mistreatment. And he kind of just brushed it off and said, I'm against all of it. And she would press him and say, well, are you against the ones in China? And he eventually said yes, but then kind of brought it back and didn't really know what else to say. But I was glad that she pressed him hard on that. But the voter enthusiasm makes a huge difference, and there were a lot of factors that played into that. So yes, coronavirus did play a small role, but remember, people at the core of who they are want freedom, especially for us as Americans. If we know our history, that is what started the birth of the United States, is that we wanted freedom from tyranny, from a king, and we wanted to set up our own republic, right? voter enthusiasm is something that Biden did not have. His base wasn't excited about his platform. I mean, his platform really, especially when you include Kamala, is a socialist one. He doesn't seem to be fully on board with it, but again, you got to take into consideration that he's 77 years old, and it's kind of setting it up so that Kamala could take over. In fact, there was even a rally that she was at. The speaker who introduced her as the next president of the United States, and so they're not even hiding it anymore. And you can catch that on Twitter or YouTube or find it somewhere, but it is there. And I think that's really what they're trying to set up. Someone made a point earlier about the votes and the difference this time from last time, because Trump won all those same states, but this time it looks like they were more prepared. I can't even imagine. There's no way, guys. There's no way, again, going back to voter enthusiasm, that Biden could or should be winning this race, especially when you compare it to the enthusiasm that Hillary had in 2016. Now that we looked at voter enthusiasm, the next thing we have to look at is how is he winning these states? And this is the whole controversy that we're debating, right? It's that as Americans, we can look at what's happening with the ballots, and we can accept the results of an election if it's fair, right? And you won't always be able to know all the details of everything, but when you see sketchy things, when you see 130,000 plus ballots that show up in the middle of the night, and they're all for one particular candidate, in this case Biden, that's sketchy. You need to question that, right? And that's what happened in Michigan. So, and again, if you were to flip those votes and let's say they were all to Trump, guys, there would be uproar, there would be riots, there would be all this crazy stuff going on. So I guess that's one good thing that hasn't happened, the fact that Trump hasn't won. There hasn't been this uproar and craziness going on, but that's something to consider. And then when you hear reports about ballots being counted in Philadelphia, I think it is, for Pennsylvania, and that they're waiting, right? Just this whole waiting period just makes it real sketchy. And they're all the swing states, some swing states, and that was purposeful. It seems like they were ready to paint this picture of, with time, and all those mail-in ballots came in, and now we know who really won, and they're thinking it's Biden. But I'm really glad that Trump is fighting this, because he's not gonna just give in. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about him, not agreeing. Remember, guys, in 2016 when they said who will accept the results of the whoever becomes the running candidate for presidency, everyone raised their hands except Trump. And I'm thinking to myself, this is great, because I know, and I knew at the time, that they were doing that just to be politically correct. Okay, I'll accept and Trump didn't. So he actually ended up looking good at the end of that, because he said, I won't accept it. If it's fair, and I'll accept it. But right now, I won't commit to that. Everyone else raised their hands and acted all politically correct, all PC. And then now comes the time, Trump is the one who gets elected. And then they start, oh, I'm not going to accept the results of this. It's just such hypocrisy. So I can appreciate that. I appreciate someone who at least is honest about where they stand, because you can work with that, right? And that was Trump. So he said he's not going to accept the results just because. He's going to say, if it's a fair election, I'll accept it. We see all this sketchy stuff going on. I think it's fair. We're not going to accept it. It's fair for him to say, we're not going to accept it. And I think even for us as Americans, we deserve to have a fair election. So that's number 2. Number 3, the social media, big tech companies, Facebook, Twitter. These are companies that silenced a lot of conservatives. They silenced President Trump, specifically Twitter. Trump would put out information, and they would they would basically ban his posts. And then they started doing it to conservatives. And this even continued until today. You know, Matt Walsh posted something, Trump retweeted it, and then that got canceled off of Twitter. You know, and then you have the big Hunter Biden story, which came out with his laptops, the connections to Russia, all of these different things, and silence, right? They don't report on it, and they call it false news. But why not let the American people decide whether or not it's false news? You let all the negative stuff that's said about Trump and said about Republicans, you let that out there. Why? You know, so if the people can determine what is good about those articles or what is negative about those articles in regards to Trump and Republicans, why not on the other side with Hunter Biden? And that was a big deal, guys. That was a big deal. The amounts of money that he was receiving for what he did not line up. Like, anyone would look at that and would say that doesn't make any sense. But they were trying to sweep it under the rug and act like nothing happened, right? But if this was information that was out there and that was not censored, I mean, people would look at that, and I think, you know, if they're honest with themselves, that they would say, you know, this actually does look kind of sketchy, right? It looks sketchy. So they were silenced on Twitter. Conservatives were silenced on Twitter. Then on Facebook, you have these fact checks. Once you let a party or someone control speech, right, you start giving up freedoms. They're going to start taking other freedoms, right? What's to say, you know, as Christians, those of us who are Christians, if we start posting the gospel and we start posting other verses that speak against sin, or we start speaking out against certain sins, well, what's going to happen if Facebook just says, oh, you know what, this is offensive, which they have done before. This is offensive speech. This offends this population of people, and this offends this other population. What's going to happen then? Right? And social media is how we really get our message out, obviously, and through the churches, but a lot of our reach now is through social media. So you open up a Pandora's box once you start doing it to one person and then to other conservatives, and then you feel like you then start getting targeted, and then your things are getting taken down. A lot of conservative speakers, Graham Allen, I think, was one of them, who had one of his videos taken down. Matt Walsh has been another one. It's just craziness, guys. It really is. And this is dangerous. This is the America that we're gonna look like in the future if, you know, they start implement these different types of policies, or if they continue to censor certain conservative speakers. So the big tech companies, Facebook and Twitter, censoring conservatives, that was a big deal, because the Hunter Biden story was a real story. It was a real issue. It was very concerning, and you can only imagine what's going to happen once now Kamala, Biden get involved. They're going to try to set up all these new deals with other countries, and, you know, we're trying to establish our peace back with them. No, guys, no one has messed with us. Trump has not entered any wars since he's taken over the presidency. That's a good thing. He's kept us out of those wars. When people say, oh, he's ready to have his hand on the button and he's going to get us into wars, hasn't happened. Everything that they've said has not happened. But we're going to be in a compromised situation, and I just hope and pray that we're ready for the repercussions of that, right? We're believers, you know, for those of us who are believers, we know who we trust in, right? I don't put my trust in the president. I love the president. I think he's doing great things for America, but he's not my savior. He's not your savior. He's not the country's savior. God reigns supreme, right? And he is the one who is sovereign over everything. And us as Americans, as Christians, our responsibility is just to do our civic duty, love each other, love people, love God, and stand up for biblical truth, stand up for truth, right? We need to do these things. And I fear that because we can't even stand up for these, you know, what I would consider smaller deals or smaller issues, when it comes to the bigger issues, standing up for your faith, when persecution comes, I fear that we're not going to be able to stand up as much as we think we are, right? You being passive, or anyone being passive in not taking a more active role in whether it be speaking up about biblical truth or just being a patriot in general, it's going to affect us in the long run. So this is kind of why I started this page or this YouTube channel, because I wanted to talk about these issues: politics, church, Christianity. You know, these are things that I enjoy talking about. And I think a lot of people are talking. I mean, it's really interesting to see as I post up these videos how many people chime in and how they'll talk about it. You know, I love that, because at least we're talking, you know, and most people have been respectful on the page, so I also appreciate that very much. So those are just 3 things that I wanted to touch on today. Why I think Biden shouldn't have won. You know, again, not enough voter enthusiasm. Second thing is the voter fraud stuff. You know, it's just sketchy stuff that does need to be looked into. Thirdly, big tech, Facebook, Twitter. The fact that they hid the Hunter Biden story just tells you so much. I mean, think about that. All you have to do is just have some common sense and think about, why did they hide that story? Why did they censor conservative speakers? Why? Is it really because of misinformation? I don't think so. So just something to think about. Hopefully you can continue tuning in. Please click subscribe on the channel so you can get more updates, and I'll keep talking about these issues if you're interested in them. All right, guys, have a good one.